He sent me divorce papers and a photo of him wrapped around another woman in the house I worked so hard to buy. That's how Nick decided to end our 6-year marriage. An email, a photo, and a single line that shattered my entire world. No conversation, no explanation, just a few clicks, and suddenly everything changed. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. But not from fear. No, this wasn't about fear. This was about pure, unadulterated rage. The image that flashed on my phone was something I never thought I'd see. Nick, my husband of 6 years, standing in our vacation home, our dream home, the place where we had spent countless weekends planning our future, wrapped around a young woman. She couldn't have been older than 23, with blonde hair and a smile that felt like a slap in the face. The house that was supposed to be ours, the house I'd paid for, was now his stage for a new chapter, and I wasn't invited. The subject of the email was simple: moving on. At first, I couldn't breathe. I felt this deep emptiness, the kind you feel when the foundation beneath you crumbles in a split second. But as I processed the words and the image, something shifted. The anger flooded in. This wasn't just a man walking away from his wife. This was an insult, a complete disregard for everything we'd built together. He thought he could just erase me with a few keystrokes. The email went on. I've moved in with Amber. My lawyer will be sending over the divorce papers shortly. Don't bother fighting it. The deed is in my name. I wanted to scream. He really thought he could just take everything? The house we bought with my hard-earned money, the business I had built from nothing, the life we'd promised each other? That wasn't going to happen, not without a fight. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Emma, my 1-year-old daughter, was sitting in her high chair, completely oblivious to the devastation unfolding before me. She babbled happily, playing with her breakfast, unaware that her father had just sent us into a storm that would change everything. But as I looked at her, a sense of calm washed over me. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about her. I wasn't going to let Nick destroy everything I had worked so hard for. I wasn't going to let him drag us both into a pit of lies and betrayal. I wasn't going to let him underestimate me. I put the phone down and took a long sip of my coffee. My hands were still shaking, but now it was a different kind of shake. It wasn't fear. It was the anticipation of what I was about to do. With a steady hand, I picked up my phone again, opened my email, and typed just 2 simple words. Are you sure about that? I added a second line. Better double-check the paperwork. I hit send. I blocked his number. I blocked his email. I didn't need anything else from him. I had been more than supportive of Nick for years. I had put my own dreams on hold to help him with his career, constantly encouraging him, running our household, all while secretly growing my own business. He always saw me as just a supportive wife, but that was his first mistake. He underestimated me. I could already hear him now, laughing with Amber, feeling like he had won. But he was about to learn a very hard lesson. He was about to learn what it really meant to underestimate me. I looked at the framed picture of us on our wedding day. The smiles, the promises, the future we had planned. All of it meant nothing to him now, but it meant something to me. And now I was going to protect that something. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen in front of me. My mind raced, replaying everything over and over. Nick's betrayal wasn't just about the affair, it was about everything he'd taken for granted. He thought I was weak. He thought he could just walk away, steal our life, and leave me to pick up the pieces. But he didn't know me as well as he thought. I pulled up the email again, my fingers running over the words he'd written. The deed is in my name. It was a lie, or at least not the whole truth. The house he thought he could claim as his own, wasn't just his. No, the legal documents, the contracts, everything we'd signed together, they had been made clear from the beginning, and I had covered my bases. He had no idea what was coming. The thing about Nick was that he always assumed I was just the doting wife, the one who supported him, who ran errands, and made sure everything at home was perfect. He'd underestimated my ambition, my ability to build something for myself. When we met, I was already running my own business, something that had been my pride and joy long before I ever met him. But Nick, he didn't understand that. He thought it was a hobby, something I just did on the side while I played the perfect housewife. He didn't know that in the time he spent focusing on his career, I had grown my business into something far bigger than he could ever imagine. And that business had paid for everything: the vacations, the house, the lifestyle. Every penny I'd made had contributed to the life we built together. But now, that life was crumbling, and I wasn't going to sit around and let it happen without a fight. I opened my laptop and began gathering the documents, proof that the house was mine. He had insisted on putting his name on the deed for tax reasons, but the money, the funds used to purchase the property, all came from my business. I had made sure of that. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't going to let him get away with this. I grabbed my phone and called my lawyer, Sarah. I had already started drafting a plan in my mind, and now it was time to put it into action. I could feel the fire inside me growing stronger, and I wasn't going to stop until I got everything back. Everything he thought he could take from me. The phone rang twice before Sarah picked up. "Julia, what's going on?" she asked, sensing the urgency in my voice. "I need you to gather everything. I want every document that proves the house is mine, not his. I need the proof of my business's financial history, the contracts, everything. And I need it now. We're going to play this game on my terms." I could hear her typing in the background. "Got it. I'll have everything ready for you in an hour." I hung up and looked over at Emma, who was now sitting in her playpen, chewing on a toy elephant. She had no idea what was happening. She was innocent, and that was exactly why I needed to do this. Not just for me, but for her future. I wasn't going to let Nick destroy everything I'd worked for, not when it meant providing her with a secure future. As I prepared my documents, my mind kept drifting to Amber. Who was she, really? How long had this been going on? How could Nick think he could just toss me aside for someone younger and more naive? Amber had no idea who she was dealing with. She thought she was winning, but she was about to learn a very painful lesson. I opened a new tab on my laptop and pulled up the security footage from the lake house. It had been my idea to install the cameras when we first bought the place. Nick had been going there more and more over the past few months, claiming it was for work, but I had a feeling there was more to it. Now those cameras would give me the proof I needed. And as I watched the footage of Nick and Amber entering the house together, I felt my blood boil. They had no idea what they were leaving behind. Amber, with her blonde hair and her wide-eyed smile, wasn't just a side note in Nick's life. She was part of the reason my whole world was crashing down. And now, I had everything I needed to make sure they paid for it. I clicked a few more buttons and accessed my business accounts. A message popped up. "Login unsuccessful." My heart skipped a beat. What was going on? I tried again, but the same message appeared. "Access denied." Nick. He had been trying to access my accounts. He thought he could control everything: our assets, our business, my future. But he had underestimated me. I quickly logged into my bank, checked my transaction history, and there it was. A large withdrawal from our joint account, nearly $50,000, had been made just the day before. I was no longer just fighting for the house. I was fighting for everything Nick had tried to take. And this was just the beginning. The next morning, I was already up before the sun. My coffee was cold by the time I took my first sip, but the caffeine did nothing to calm the storm brewing inside me. It had been less than 24 hours since Nick sent me that email, but I already had a plan. A plan he was going to regret underestimating. I looked over at Emma, still sleeping peacefully in her crib, and a rush of emotion flooded over me. I couldn't let this be the life she inherited, one where her father thought it was okay to lie, cheat, and steal everything from us. I was going to make sure he paid for everything he took, starting with the house. I spent the next few hours gathering all the legal documents I needed. Every contract, every proof of ownership. I dug through my business records, piecing together evidence that would expose Nick for who he really was. The house, the assets, everything I had built. It was mine. And now I was going to fight for it, not just in the courts, but in ways Nick could never have predicted. I was done playing nice, done being the supportive wife. Nick thought he could push me aside and get away with it. But there was one thing he didn't count on. Me. I called Sarah, my lawyer, again. I need you to send out the first round of paperwork. I want the divorce to be filed today, and I want you to make sure he knows we're not backing down. Got it, Sarah replied, her voice steady. I'll file the initial paperwork and make sure your side is protected. You're not alone in this. I hung up and opened the file labeled Lake House security footage on my laptop. I watched the footage of Nick and Amber moving in and out of the house over the last few weeks. He had no idea that every trip, every conversation was being recorded. The footage was damning, but I needed more. I needed to hit him where it would hurt the most. I made a quick call to my accountant. I need a full audit of our joint accounts and business accounts. Every transaction. I want to know exactly where the money has been going the last few months. I'll have that ready for you within the hour, she said. Perfect. I needed to know how far Nick had gone in his quest to steal everything from me, and I had a feeling the financial side of things would tell me more than enough. If he thought he could access my business funds and cover his tracks, he was about to find out I was 3 steps ahead of him. As the day wore on, I kept working, making calls, sending emails. My mind was laser-focused. Nick didn't stand a chance. I knew every move he was going to make, and I was prepared to counter it all. His lawyer would be getting my documents soon, but I wasn't just fighting for a piece of property. I was fighting for my reputation, for my business, and for the future of my daughter. By the time the evening came, I had everything I needed. I had secured our joint accounts, transferred the funds back into my control, and locked down every legal document that tied Nick to the property. The final blow came when I managed to access his emails. I was prepared for this. Nick thought his corporate secrets were safe, but I had one last trick up my sleeve. I spent hours sifting through his emails, messages with Amber, exchanges with his colleagues, and most importantly, communications with the CEO of his company. It was all there. The plot to take everything I had, the lies he'd told about me, the way he had manipulated his way into securing his position at work. And what I found was a smoking gun. One email stood out. It was a chain of messages between Nick and Amber, discussing how they would divide the spoils of their plan once they took everything from me. It made my blood run cold, but it also gave me the final piece of the puzzle. I saved the email, marked it as critical evidence, and called Sarah immediately. We've got him, I said, my voice sharp. The final proof we need is in the emails. He's been plotting against me with Amber for months. They've been planning this all along. I want you to send this to his company's board of directors, along with the evidence of his corporate espionage. Let's make sure this is the end for him. Sarah didn't hesitate. Consider it done. I hung up the phone and stood up, looking out the window at the lake house in the distance. It seemed so far away now, like a distant memory of a life that no longer existed. But what mattered now wasn't the house. It was what was coming next, the destruction of everything Nick had tried to take from me. The war had just begun, and this time, there was no going back. The day I sent the final batch of documents to Nick's lawyer, I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. But it was far from over. Now, the real battle was about to unfold, and I was ready. I had secured my business accounts, locked down the house, and now, the world would see the truth of what Nick had been hiding from everyone. He thought he could control me, manipulate me, and walk away unscathed. But he was wrong. So wrong. The first response came from Nick's lawyer within hours. The email was full of empty threats, trying to intimidate me into backing down. We will be pursuing full legal action regarding your unlawful behavior, it read. We'll be investigating the property and your financial records in great detail. I read it once, twice. Then I laughed. I immediately forwarded it to Sarah. Let's make sure they know who they're messing with, I typed. Send them everything, and I mean everything. As I sat back in my chair, I realized something. This wasn't just about the house. This wasn't just about the money. This was about destroying everything Nick had tried to build. This was about showing him that no one could walk all over me, especially not him. I took a deep breath and dialed my accountant. I want a full audit of Nick's company. Everything, every file, every transaction, and I want the board to get it. Are you sure? She asked, clearly hesitant. That could get messy. Messy is exactly what I want, I replied coldly. If he's going down hard. I could almost hear the smile in her voice as she agreed. I'll get it done. By that evening, the email to Nick's company board had gone out. The evidence was undeniable. The emails, the security footage, the financial documents. It was all laid out. Everything he had been hiding. Everything he thought he could get away with. But the real shock came when I got a call from the CEO of Nick's company, Robert. Julia! His voice was tight, filled with panic. What do you think you're doing? I knew exactly what he was thinking. He was probably sitting at his desk, staring at the email I'd just sent, trying to figure out how everything was going to unravel for him. You know exactly what I'm doing, Robert, I said, my voice ice cold. I'm exposing your son's lies. I'm exposing the fact that he's been using insider information to manipulate his way into a promotion. And now I'm going to make sure everyone knows just how far he's gone. There was a brief silence before Robert spoke again, his voice trembling. You don't understand. You're going to ruin everything for all of us. You can't do this. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Too late for that. You should have thought of that before your son and Amber decided to make me their target. Now, I'm going to make sure they regret it. The call ended with a click. Robert was clearly trying to save face, but I knew the truth. He had a lot more to lose than I did, and the weight of what was coming would be too much for him to handle. The next morning, I woke up to a flood of emails and messages. Nick's lawyer had responded, furious. The company's board was scrambling, and Amber's social media was blowing up with negative comments from all directions. This wasn't just about a broken marriage anymore. It was about exposing the rot that had been hiding behind closed doors for far too long. I saw the look on my daughter's face as I walked into the living room. She was smiling, happy, and I couldn't help but smile back. This wasn't just for me. This was for her. This was for her future. As the day went on, it became clear that Nick's world was crumbling faster than he could control. His lawyer was sending desperate emails, trying to mitigate the damage I had caused. But it was no use. The truth was out, and now there was no going back. And then came the bombshell. I received a call from Sarah. Julia, we've got something huge. We found evidence of a transfer to offshore accounts. Over $500,000 that Nick has been funneling away from both your joint accounts and his company. This isn't just embezzlement, this is fraud. I felt my stomach drop. $500,000. This wasn't just a matter of a house and a failed marriage anymore. This was real criminal activity. And now, I had everything I needed to ensure Nick would never walk free again. I paused for a moment, the weight of it all sinking in. He thought he could destroy everything I had built. He thought he could run away with it all. But now it was my turn to take control. The moment the emails started flooding in, I knew Nick's empire was collapsing. His lawyer's desperate pleas to settle the case quietly were laughable now. Every piece of evidence was laid out before him. My legal documents, the email chains, the stolen funds, the security footage. It was all there. And there was no escaping it. By the time the day was over, it wasn't just about Nick anymore. It was about Amber, too. Her reputation had been shattered, as news spread like wildfire. She had no idea the monster she was involved with. She thought she was stepping into a perfect life, but all she'd stepped into was a disaster that would haunt her for years. Nick's company was in disarray. Robert, his father, was trying to keep things together. But the board had already made their decision. I was in the clear. Nick was fired, stripped of every privilege he thought he could claim. And Amber, Well, she was swiftly removed from the social scene she'd worked so hard to establish. She wasn't the bright young star she thought she was. She was just another pawn in Nick's game, and now she was discarded like one. I stared at my phone as the news came in. Legal actions were in motion, and the stolen money was being returned. Every transaction, every illegal move Nick had made, was now being investigated thoroughly. His company had found out about his fraudulent activities: corporate espionage, money laundering, and embezzlement. There was no way out for him. His career was finished. But what hurt more than losing his job, what tore him apart more than anything, was the realization that he'd lost me. The woman he thought was just his supportive wife was now the woman who brought him to his knees. He could never take away what I'd built, no matter how hard he tried. And the final blow came with the police. They knocked on my door 2 days after everything had gone public. I already knew what it was about. Nick had tried to hide everything, every penny he'd siphoned off into offshore accounts, every fraudulent transaction he thought no one would uncover. But now it was all coming to light. The police were there to arrest him. The case had already been made. And it wasn't just for the stolen money. It was for the damage he'd done to me and Emma. It was for trying to ruin my life, my business, and my reputation. As the handcuffs clicked on his wrists, I didn't feel any sorrow. I felt nothing at all. Nick had always thought he was above it all. He thought he could play with people's lives, hurt them without consequence. But today, the tables had turned. I watched from my front window as the police car pulled away, taking him in. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. It wasn't because I wanted revenge. It was because I had gotten justice. The battle was over, and I had won. I walked back into my home office, where everything had started. Papers were scattered across the desk, the remnants of the battle that had played out over the past few days. But it wasn't chaos anymore. It was closure. And as I sat there, looking at the legal documents and the financial statements, I felt something stir inside me, a sense of pride. The story that Nick had written for us was finished. Now it was time for me to write my own.